The United States could be dealing with a national security issue. We have war breaking out in the Middle East, on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, near the Red Sea, Russia, Ukraine. We have the European Union mad at Tucker Carlson for giving Vladimir Putin a voice. So many big stories going on. To help me better understand this, I have former CIA Larry Johnson. Larry, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure, Stephen.
So, yesterday I witnessed two things. First, Special Counsel Robert Hur, who was assigned to investigate whether President Biden had broken security protocol with having top secret and classified documents from being a senator and also a vice president. He announced that he was not going to bring charges against President Joe Biden because he is a weak old man with a poor memory.
Yeah.
Biden then did a press conference to get out in front of this story, but he came across incredibly angry. And then, as he defended how good his memory is, he made several big mistakes, saying that it was because of him he was able to get humanitarian aid into Gaza because of conversations with the president of Mexico.
Yeah.
Then he called the president of Mexico Sisi, who's really the president of Egypt. Has Joe Biden become a national security threat with his mind and mental capacity?
He was a national security threat even before he started into the early stages of dementia and headed towards Alzheimer's. I mean, he was dangerous, as Robert Gates, the former head of the CIA and former Secretary of Defense, said that on every single foreign policy issue, Biden was wrong. And so it's now compounded because he can barely remember where he was yesterday and what he had for breakfast this morning. So yeah, the decline in mental faculties, and what Robert Hur did was put a stake in the heart of the Biden administration, because that's really all the cable news now is talking about. That has become the story, that Biden is not mentally competent. And, the Republicans have been, Fox News, the Republican channel, has been talking about this repeatedly over the last 3 years, and nobody paid much attention. I saw that even when CNN has Jeffrey Toobin, Mr., Zoomer himself, coming in after attacking Biden on it, as well as another woman. I don't know what her name was, but she was, they were both just savaging Biden, because he comes out and said, "Hey, I'm not mentally unfit," and then proceeds to demonstrate that he is mentally unfit. So it's just the media is all over that story now, and I think this will continue to build. This is not going to go away because it's not fixable. Biden can't just suddenly turn around tomorrow and go, man, I feel great. I started, drinking this vitamin. My brain is sharp. I'm clear. The signs, the visible signs of decay and decline are quite evident. In fact, I saw someone comparing his speech and the aftermath of the 2020 primary in South Carolina with what he gave 4 years later. And it's noticeably different. And it's different in a bad way. So, yeah, he's dangerous. The real question, the unanswered question, and even we saw that with Tucker Carlson's interview with Vladimir Putin, even the Russians are wondering, who the hell's in charge? Who's really the decision maker? Who's ready to push the button or not push the button?
Yeah, that's terrifying. I remember going into the 2020 election that summer, I would see Trump do like an airport, gathering, and there would be 50,000 people screaming, and then I would see the Joe Biden one, and there was about 12 people, and he struggled to get his words out, and I said to my wife, this looks like somebody with dementia, right? Well, then he gets to the final debate. He's obviously gone tanning. His hair's nice and trimmed. He came out really sharp. I said, my gosh, they must have injected him with, dementia medication, that because the year before that, a new dementia medication had come out. It was $50,000 a year. Then they couldn't sell it. They lowered it to 25. Then they lowered it again. Anyway, that medicine came out. I said, my gosh, they've got to be injecting him. But you're right. It's one thing for Jesse Waters or Greg Gutfeld or Sean Hannity to say, Joe Biden is losing his mind. He's dangerous. It's very different for Jeffrey Lubin Toobin to go on CNN.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Like
I
that.
came up with that on the spot. Lubin Toobin. You can Google why Jeffrey Toobin is famous. Anyway, they came on and they said he's embarrassed himself in front of the nation.
Yeah.
He just maybe killed his own presidential campaign. I want to read off a couple of things that stood out to me, Larry. During the investigation, they realized that Joe Biden cannot remember his time as vice president. He has almost no memories of being vice president. He can't remember the dates of when he was vice president. He was constantly asking people, now remind me, when was I in office? Remind me, what did I do as vice president? This one's heartbreaking. He can't remember how or when his son Beau died. He believes he was killed in Iraq, serving as a military person, when in fact he died from brain cancer. He can't remember that. They pointed out he keeps telling people about productive meetings with global leaders who are dead. Some of them have been dead for over a decade. So it's like he's thinking of memories he had when he was vice president. Also, the author of his biography memoir shared that even 6 years ago, Biden couldn't remember many parts of being in Congress, family life, or being president of the United States. Is there any chance that they are pumping him full of some kind of an upper or some kind of dementia medication? Because we now know that JFK was being injected. He had a doctor going around the world with him, injecting him for his back pains.
Oh no, there's no doubt about that. He is. You remember he had a brain tumor that was operated on back in 1980s, early 1990s, and he recovered from that, but they still took out a portion of his brain. It was where the tumor was. So he already was at a bit of a, let's call it a mental deficit with that. So no, absolutely. I don't know if it's cocaine or what.
Didn't he have a couple of aneurysms as well?
That I don't know.
Okay.
But I do recall the brain tumor.
Okay.
Which is, it tends to be a genetic thing, which is no surprise that his son Beau died of that. But this is why the 25th Amendment was created, specifically for this reason. And I now fully anticipate, because there's serious talk underway, they're going to execute it. The thing that has everyone terrified is they don't trust Kamala Harris to step up and be president. They see her as just as bad mentally as Joe Biden, only she can't explain it according to age. She's just stupid.
Yeah, I think they would have replaced him by now if they had a different vice president in place. She tends to embarrass herself with jumbling words. The news calls it word salad. I've gone back, I've listened to a few. I'm like, I don't know. I don't understand what it is that you're trying to articulate here. So I remember when Trump, officially left the White House, he said to the press, the 25th Amendment will come back to haunt Joe Biden. I think you're right. I think that they're probably now. So do they just remove him and put Kamala in and find a new vice president? Or do they say, she'll take over the duties, we'll allow him his dignity, but he won't make decisions or have the nuclear football or make military decisions? Or will they try to replace him at the Democrat convention?
Yeah, I think the preferred scenario is to get to the convention, have Biden resign, and then select somebody else as the presidential candidate, give Kamala her chance to run for that, and then select someone other than Kamala, and then hope that they can put together a credible campaign. That's the preferred option. However, Biden is at the age where he could he could not come down for breakfast, is the expression. He could die tomorrow, or suffer a stroke and be genuinely physically incapacitated, which would then, if that happens, then Kamala becomes president, and then the Democrats have a real problem. Because once she's got her clause in that, she's not going to relent. Once she's named president, then she would have to select a vice presidential candidate that would be voted on both in the House and the Senate by a simple majority. But that puts the Republicans in a unique position to exercise some measure of control over who gets to be vice president. They've got enough votes to block it, potentially. Wow. So they could. What we're looking at is a level of political chaos and uncertainty in this country that we've never seen before.
Larry, what do you think? You've dealt with this. You've lived around the world. You have seen the chatter that the CIA works on. What messaging do you think is going around the world right now among Putin, NATO leaders, European Union, Africa, China? What do you think is going on with all of this information in the last 24 hours?
They're desperately trying to figure out who the hell's in charge. Who's calling the shots? Because they clearly recognize that with each passing day, Biden is non compos mentis, not mentally competent. And I think, as we saw in the Tucker interview with Vladimir Putin, genuinely puzzled. They know somebody's pulling the strings. They're just not sure who. Is it Barack Obama? Is it Bill and Hillary Clinton? Who is it behind the scenes that's doing this? Reportedly, Obama went directly to Biden 3-4 weeks ago. Barack did, and told him that he needed to resign. And, Biden dug in his heels and refused. So it's frightening to think that the likes of a Jake Sullivan, who's just a lightweight beyond compare, is somehow calling the shots. So it's questionable.
Could it be Antony Blinken? He's in the media a lot.
Yeah, but it's possible. But it's just, I don't know, and nobody seems to know. That's what's disturbing.
And tell me if you agree or disagree with this, but I think that there are many nations and citizens of those nations that they want a strong American president. Global security depends on the United States being strong, whether it's us sticking our nose where it doesn't belong, but having strength within a first world nation, I think, is important to some countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they just want to know that there's somebody competent in charge. And what they're seeing right now from the United States is incompetence across the board. Just like the decision the other day to launch this missile strike in Baghdad. That's insane, because we have diplomatic relations, normal diplomatic relations with Iraq. So your first step is to go to the government of Iraq and say, hey, we know where this guy is. We know what he's done. Here's our indictment. Here's our démarche. We want to extradite him. Go through the diplomatic steps first and make it an issue to where the onus is on Iraq to comply according to international law. But instead, in that case, the United States completely flouted international law. Now, a president with a sound mind and mature judgment would have recognized right away, wait a second, we can't risk doing this. The other thing is, Biden is taking these unilateral military actions now in Yemen and Syria and Iraq, and without the backing of the Congress. And, you know, they'll argue, well, I'm president. I can do whatever, you know, when American lives are at risk, I got to act. Well, that's so stupid and short-sighted, because if it goes wrong, if there are Americans that end up being killed, pilots downed, you know, a whole variety of things, well, if you've got Congress's authorization to do it, then you're not by yourself. You've got, hey, those members of the House and Senate, they said I could. And I'm acting on behalf of the American people as expressed by the representatives of the American people. But when you do it on your own, you don't got anywhere to hide. It's on you. And, you know, it's politically risky, enormously risky. So, I mean, even George W. Bush, he got what was called the AUMF, Authorization for Use of Military Force, both in respect to going after terrorists connected to Al-Qaeda, and then AUMF to go into Iraq. Normally, we would have gone to the you go to the United Nations and get authorization for that. Like we had authorization in 1991 from the UN to go into Iraq, but we didn't in 2003. And so there again, you've got domestic political coverage, but it certainly damages you internationally. So what we're seeing from the Biden administration right now is a series of actions that are portraying the United States as reckless, as dangerous, and as weak.
Okay, the help me better understand this, and forgive my naivety. The hit in Baghdad.
Yeah.
So they bypass diplomacy, they bypass partnerships that we've established. Probably the CIA has a lot of contacts in the area. Who would have made the final call? Would that go to the Joint Chiefs of Staff? Would that go to a general? Would that go to Biden?
The way this, well, initially usually the way this works is the order comes down from the top,
okay,
from the White House or SecDef. I think this would have originated with the White House. Number one, they were briefed on targeting options. They made the decision to go down. An operations order is issued, then followed by the Central Command general has to issue what's called a CONOP, a concept of operations. And then there's the Secretary of Defense signs off on what's called an execute order, XORD. So, but that's approved also by the president. So President, Secretary of Defense, and then the general is in charge of executing. So that would have come out of the White House. And, you know, people will say, well, what's wrong with killing a terrorist like that? Okay, we declare him a terrorist. The rest of the world hasn't. What would we do if Iran launched a cruise missile in downtown Washington, D.C. to attack an Iranian dissident? Right?
Yeah.
And killed him. We'd be outraged.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, and we would see it as a casus belli. Of course, and as a justification for going to war.
Yeah.
And the only reason Iraq doesn't, quote, go to war with us is they're militarily incapable. But that's what I'm saying. We're creating that kind of precedent.
Wow, that's scary. Sorry, I'm like trying to gather my thoughts because, you know, I remember Colonel McGregor telling me one time that presidents and Congress hide behind the military too often.
Mm-hmm.
And when the United States, who used to be really great at diplomacy, when they don't lead out with diplomacy and they lead out with the military, it almost always goes bad. That trying to move things by force instead of by persuasion is really dangerous. Let's switch gears, Larry. I want to talk about the Russia-Ukraine situation. Why is the Pentagon and NATO and specifically the European Union, why are they so mad at Tucker Carlson for allowing a global leader to share his side of the story of why a country went to war? We all want to know. We're all curious.
Yeah.
But why? Why block that?
Well, they don't want the truth out. You know, what Putin laid out last night was a very compelling case that, you know, since 1991, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia rejected its communist past. Russia embraced Christianity. It is a Christian nation. And Russia wanted to become part of the capitalist West and engage in trade and commerce, and but on a basis of respect, and had been promised that there would be no expansion of NATO to the east. One lie upon another by the West, and so you know, Putin was there to explode all of those myths. What's fascinating is I just looked at CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, the websites. Not a word, not a word about the interview. No coverage, zero. Shut it out. But that video now has over 130 million views. Okay, that's 1/3 the size of the United States. That's more views. If you took all of the daily viewers, the highest hour of ratings for MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, ABC, NBC, CBS combined, Tucker's got 7 to 8 times what they have. I mean, it's phenomenal. So they try to cover it up, they try to ignore it, but they don't realize they're irrelevant now. Yeah. And Tucker has definitely become a force. So that's one of the reasons, you know, it's childish. It's juvenile. We're gonna hold our breath and shut our eyes until you do what we want. Well, go ahead and pass out.
Yeah, well, I saw. My wife is out of town, and I did 6 videos yesterday, on top of editing and research to meet certain deadlines. And so I was exhausted. My wife's out of town. I have 3 little kids, so I couldn't jump on or go live about it. But I saw another YouTuber. He had 145,000 people watching it live with him as he did commentary on it. It's unbelievable. I think people really wanted to hear this other side of the story. Now, I hope that Zelensky will allow Tucker Carlson into Ukraine, but with what they did to I just forgot his name. Lira,
Gonzalo Lira.
Yes, Gonzalo Lira. Thank you.
Gonzalo.
Yeah, what they did with Gonzalo, I don't know if I would go in there if I was Tucker Carlson. Even if they agreed to the interview, I would maybe request it was in a different country, just because you don't know how Ukraine may. I mean, I personally know people that are on the Ukrainian death list because of covering the war on YouTube.
Right.
I don't know that my name's on there, you know. So, okay. Speaking of Zelensky. Big news coming out of Ukraine is that he has asked or forced General Zaluzhny to step down. Is this a wise move because they need to regroup and move forward? Is this just rearranging chairs on the Titanic while it's sinking? Or is this to try to maybe use him as a scapegoat to keep Zelensky favorable so he can request more money from the world?
Can we say yes, all of the above?
If you think that.
Well, okay. So it's really, number one, this was not an amicable parting. This was Zelensky forcing Zaluzhny out, but it's not clear how he forced him out. I think that they announced that he's gone, but it's not clear to me that Zaluzhny's out of the picture yet for this reason. He's got the backing of former President Poroshenko and the backing of the mayor of Kiev, Klitschko, you know, the former boxer. So they're both in Zaluzhny's camp. Zaluzhny is far more popular than Zelensky is at this moment. Zelensky had been, you know, the reports had been leaking for 2 weeks that Zaluzhny was gone, that he tried to fire him. He told him he was fired, and Zaluzhny refused to go. And when the announcement finally came, it came at like 8 p.m. At night in Kiev. So the normal way you do a transition, if it's amicable, is the president shows up and says, hey, I'd like to thank General Zaluzhny here. He's been a great guy, served this country well, but we are going to move on now, have a good life, give him a gift, pat him on the ass, and away he goes. Didn't do that. Sort of the dark of night, they announce he's gone, and General Syrski's in. Now, here's where the confusion about the narrative breaks down. So it's portrayed that the decision maker is Zelensky, right? That he's the one controlling the military decisions. Well, but yet they're blaming Zaluzhny for the failed counteroffensive. So from that standpoint, scapegoat. But if Zelensky's the one making the calls, then he's the one responsible for the failed counteroffensive, not Zaluzhny. And Zaluzhny was on the record previously protesting against what the United States and the United Kingdom were directing him to do, because he said, we can't do this without air power. If we don't have close air support, fixed-wing aircraft that can provide bombings on Russian defensive sites, or to at least give us a chance, we're going to get wiped out. Well, they got wiped out. There are other reports have circulated that Zelensky insisted that Zaluzhny keep forces in Bakhmut. Zaluzhny, as a general, said, no, we got to pull out of Bakhmut. It's a no-win situation. Same for Avdiivka, which is underway right now, and the Ukrainians are just getting their ass handed to them, big time. They're suffering massive casualties, and the Russians are making significant advances. So on the one hand, they're trying to blame Zaluzhny as a scapegoat for all the failed military adventures, except the guy they're putting in charge, Syrsky, he's actually been the one that was in command at like Bakhmut. And he's been in command in multiple situations where the Ukrainians have gotten beat because the general in charge made bad tactical and strategic decisions. Also, he's not well liked at all. Syrsky is despised among many in the military ranks, whereas Zaluzhny was well respected. The negative on Zaluzhny is that Zaluzhny was closely aligned with the neo-Nazi elements, the Azov Battalion, the Kraken Battalion, the Death Heads, the Toten folks. So, it's not that Zaluzhny was some great military mastermind, but he did have a measure of competence and judgment, but it was purportedly constantly overrode by Zelensky. So, yeah, he is on paper gone. I don't think he's sitting back doing nothing. I think there is now active plotting going on that will lead to the removal of Zelensky. We could maybe have a betting pool to see who goes first, Zelensky or Biden. Who's going to last longest in office. But it's real chaos. And this kind of chaos at the top, both politically and militarily, affects the ability of commanders in the field to carry out their duties. No colonel, lieutenant colonel, or major are going to take any initiatives without being sure, number one, who's in charge, and number two, that they've got the backing of that superior. Because otherwise, if you take actions that are not approved or blessed or sanctioned, you could find yourself being lined up in front of a firing squad or losing your job. And maybe some of them would welcome losing their job, taking them off the front line where they're not at risk of dying. Because the officer corps, the senior officer corps, what I'm talking, lieutenant colonel, have really been decimated in a major fashion, that they're having to turn to captains and even lieutenants to fill positions that previously would have been filled by a lieutenant colonel or a colonel.
Wow. Well, I wondered if maybe General Zaluzhny was being removed not because of Ukraine's performance against Russia, even though it's not been what NATO wanted, but because Zaluzhny publicly said, we're at a stalemate. We're not moving forward. For me, and maybe I missed something, but to me, that seemed to be like the first crack in the relationship between Zelensky and Zaluzhny was Zaluzhny said we're at a stalemate, and Zelensky said don't say that. No, we can still win this. We need more money, more weapons, more support. So I don't know, just a thought that I had.
Well, it goes back. It goes back even longer than that, because it goes to Battle of Bakhmut was a year ago, and it was as that battle for Bakhmut was it was in the midst of that the first signs of real tension emerged between Zelensky and Zaluzhny, because Zaluzhny wanted to pull the troops out. The other rub has been Zaluzhny told Zelensky, okay, we need 500,000. We need to mobilize Ukraine on a war footing. We need 500,000 new soldiers. But Zaluzhny would not go to the Rada, to the legislature in Kiev, and make that case. He left it to the politicians. And the mobilization bill is very, very unpopular. And yet the Rada this week passed the first draft of it. You may have to go, I'm not sure how many times it has to be voted on to become law, but there's some fear that if the current version becomes law, it's going to end up destroying the Ukrainian economy, because they're going to take people who are performing critical roles in the economy out, putting them in the military, and the economy is going to grind to a halt. Plus, they're talking about if you don't willingly come along, we're going to freeze your bank account. Well, faced with freezing bank accounts, people are going to run on the banks, start taking their money out. So, again, that was another friction point. What is, and there's now, we just saw today, a small group of protesters showed up at Maidan Square to protest against Zelensky and call for his removal. If the numbers of that keep growing, and there's some indications that may occur, then we're looking at some real political chaos and another coup akin to what happened in 2014.
Wow, lots going on there. So much going on. Okay, let's see. We could talk about Israel. We could talk about Iran. Let's actually come back home domestically. Where do you see this Texas border crisis going? Is the Texas border, is Biden now going to shift gears into protecting his image and remaining in power and ignore, Texas being defiant to federal mandates to let illegals into the country? Or where do you see this Texas border crisis going?
Yeah, no, I think it's become now pretty simple. Greg Abbott did nothing for almost 3 years. Could have, didn't do anything to stop it. Other Democrats, mayors, Eric Adams in New York City, and Muriel Bowers in Washington, D.C., and I forget the name of the clown running Chicago.
Johnson.
I should know that.
It's okay.
No relation.
No relation.
That they were not hollering and screaming. Well, now everybody's hollering and screaming. It's not just Greg Abbott. And Abbott's got the backing of 26 other governors. And then you've got the Democrat mayors. They're coughing it up now. They can't stand this. Something's got to be done. So now it's become a bipartisan political issue. Stop the illegal migrants. And Biden is going to be forced to do a 180. Or as Annalena Baerbock in Germany calls it, a 360. But no, he's going to have to do an about face and now try to enforce limitations and restrictions on people coming into the country, because it is crossed over the Democrats. There are many, many Democrats now are upset about it and not feeling safe. And in particular, as images come out of New York City showing these migrants beating up these two cops, and then that fat, despicable attorney, district attorney, Bragg, just let him go, refused to prosecute, didn't hold him. And people say, okay, this has got to stop, because otherwise you're turning, you're going to turn it into a free fire zone. They already had an incident again yesterday in Times Square. Some guy tried to rob some woman. She gets shot. There's a gun battle in Times Square with, again, it was one of these illegal migrants. They're still looking for it. The other day, this crazed homeless guy follows a woman off the subway in New York City and just literally kicks the shit out of her. And I mean, kicking her, pummeling her. Nobody had come to her aid. There was one guy that walked through the turnstile, saw it. The crazy man turned towards him, and the other guy ran away. So, I mean, you got a city full of cowards, bullies, criminals, perverts, and, you know, anybody that wants to go there. I had someone offer to say, hey, you know, we'd like to have you come up for an interview. We'll fly up. I said, no, thanks. You can't pay me enough money to go to New York City these days. Sorry. Unless you allow me to go with my firearm.
Yeah.
If I can go with my concealed carry, okay, I'll do it. But otherwise, not going.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. Final thing. Scott Ritter has said putting military on the southern border is the most dangerous thing a president could do to protect the country. Colonel Douglas Macgregor has said it's the best solution would be to put military presence on the southern border. What are your thoughts on military on the southern border?
So let's come back and ask the more fundamental question. What is the purpose of our military? Why do we have an army? Why do we have a Navy, an Air Force, and a Marine Corps? Well, is it governed by any clear strategy? In theory, I believe our military's primary purpose is to defend and protect the United States of America. Okay, protect it against what? Well, we've ginned up all these imaginary threats overseas that we need to go spend, you know, literally over $1 trillion on to fight needless wars that accomplish nothing in terms of shoring up our security, while the border is wide open. So yeah, I'm with Doug on this. You know, activate the military to secure the border because it's an invasion. Not everybody's coming across with a gun or a tank or a truck, but it's an invasion. Stop the invasion. The other thing you do is, you know, you shut down all the border crossings with Mexico. And you tell the Mexican president, these are not opening for any reason until you stop the influx of people transiting your territory to come to the United States. Not opening it. The drug traffickers would have that president straightened out real quick because they want the drugs to continue to flow into the United States. That kind of shutdown would severely hamper their commercial enterprise. Those are a couple of the steps that need to be taken. But apart from dealing with the immediate issue of the border, what the United States really needs right now is to step back and figure out what is it that we need? What kind of military do we want? What's our requirement? Right now, we've got troops stationed at over 600 bases around the world. That's insane. We've got troops based in Syria at least two different bases. And their mission ostensibly is to fight ISIS, except we're not fighting ISIS. We're guarding oil. Part of the oil is being provided to Israel. Oil that's going in and being sold to Turkey, that Turkey's then reselling for a profit. Same for Israel. So, you know, the purpose of the U.S. military is not to go out and be the gendarme for oil companies. Let the oil companies hire their own damn security. Don't put that on the U.S. taxpayer.
Yeah. Is there any chance that the U.S. military is used to keep the strength of the U.S. petrodollar?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Of course, you know, see what we're witnessing right now is, I call it the limits of U.S. military power. We cannot stop the Houthis from launching anti-ship missiles. We've been bombing. We've been running this operation in the Red Sea to stop the Houthis since December 19th. Okay. We're coming up on 2 months. We haven't stopped it. And in fact, one of the British destroyers that was there has been run off. They claim they had technical difficulties. I think that means they probably got hit with a missile, didn't want to admit it, but they had damage and have to sell off. And yet, the United States, with all these airstrikes, with all these bombing campaigns, we're not we're not reducing the Houthi will, and the Houthis are accomplishing their mission, which was to prevent ships from going in and out of Israel. And now they've added to that U.S. and U.K. ships, to the point that it was, I don't recall if it was Israel or the United States. One of them tried to go get their ship flagged as a Chinese ship, because the Houthis are allowing Chinese, Saudi ships, any other ship can go through. Just no Israeli. If you're owned by Jews, you don't get to go. By U.S., by Americans, by Brits, you don't get to go. Everybody else free to pass. They're the only ones, candidly, who are actually doing something of substance to try to stop the Israeli murder of Palestinians.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh. Wow. Well, we could go on and on for probably a couple hours. I saw an interview the other day that lasted 6 hours. I was like, man, I don't even have time to watch that. So
good Lord.
Yeah, we'll be respectful of your time and the viewers. But
yeah,
thank you for coming on and sharing your insight on what's going on in the Red Sea with Russia, Ukraine, Europe, and also back here at home with our United States president. Larry Johnson, is the best way for people to follow you still sonar21.com?
That's it.
Okay.
It's got all the relevant links there.
Yeah, I'll put a link down below. Appreciate you coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right, Stephen. Thanks so much.